My daughter called me at the same time every night and asked, "Dad, are you home?" If I said yes, she'd hang up immediately. If I said no, she'd insist on knowing exactly where I was. Last night I lied and told her I was home. I never thought that lie would save my life, because what happened in the next 72 hours didn't just threaten my life, but also exposed a betrayal so deep it made me question whether this life was even worth living. Now I must expose the monster who's destroying my family. Hi everyone and welcome. Please like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Important note, this is a fictional story with creative elements for storytelling purposes. Any resemblance to persons or events is purely coincidental, but the themes hold deep significance. Now let's begin. The phone would ring at exactly 8:30. It had been that way for 3 months now, ever since the calls started. I sat in Patricia's old armchair, the one she'd claimed as hers for 40 years, and watched the second hand on the grandfather clock sweep toward the 6. Outside the window, November darkness had swallowed the Wyoming landscape whole. The cottonwood trees along the property line were bare black fingers against a sky that threatened snow. I was 66 years old, a widower running a 200-acre horse ranch alone, and my daughter called me every single night to ask the same question. The phone lit up right on schedule. Natalie's name glowed on the screen. "Hey, sweetheart," I said, trying to sound normal, trying to sound like a father who wasn't starting to wonder why his only child checked on him with the regularity of a prison guard counting inmates. "Hi, Dad." Her voice came through tight, controlled. "Are you alone?" There it was. The question she'd asked every night since August. Never, "How are you?" or "How was your day?" Just that single, strange inquiry that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I'd answered honestly every other time. Told her yes, I was alone, just me and the 15 horses in the barn and the endless Wyoming wind. Tonight something made me lie. "No," I said. "Sheriff Monroe just stopped by. We're having coffee." The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Then I heard her breathing quick, shallow, like she'd been startled. "Sheriff Monroe is there right now." That's what I said. Another pause. In the background I heard a man's voice, muffled, indistinct. Brandon, probably. My son-in-law had been hovering around Natalie like a shadow lately. "Oh, that's good, Dad. That's really good." Her words came faster now, tripping over each other. "Listen, I have to go. Tell the sheriff I said hello." "Natalie, wait." The line went dead. I stared at the phone in my hand, listening to the silence that filled the house like water filling a sinking ship. The grandfather clock ticked. The furnace hummed. Somewhere in the barn, one of the horses whinnied. Sheriff Monroe wasn't here, of course. Frank Monroe was probably home in Cheyenne with his wife watching television and drinking beer like normal people did on Tuesday nights. I'd lied to my daughter for the first time in, I couldn't remember when, and she'd been relieved. No more than relieved. She'd been rattled, thrown off, like my answer had been wrong, somehow had disrupted some plan I wasn't supposed to know about. I pushed myself out of Patricia's chair, my knees creaking in protest. 2 years since I'd lost her to cancer, and I still couldn't bring myself to sit anywhere else in the evenings. This chair smelled like her lavender hand cream, held the shape of her body. It was the last place I felt close to her. The house settled around me with familiar sounds. 40 years I'd lived here, raised Natalie within these walls, buried my wife from the front parlor. I knew every creak, every draft, every shadow. Which is why I noticed immediately when something was different. I walked through the living room, past the sofa Patricia and I had bought in 1985, past the wedding photo on the mantel where we both looked impossibly young, into the kitchen, where I'd left dirty dinner dishes in the sink because there was nobody to clean up for anymore. And there on the kitchen table, the old oak table where Natalie had done her homework, where Patricia had paid bills, where we'd celebrated 40 birthdays and Christmases and ordinary Tuesdays, sat a white envelope. I stopped in the doorway, my hand still on the light switch. The envelope hadn't been there 20 minutes ago when I'd finished eating. I was certain of that. The table had been bare except for the salt and pepper shakers Patricia's mother had given us as a wedding present. Now there was an envelope. White, expensive-looking, unsealed. My heart kicked against my ribs like one of the horses fighting its stall. I crossed the kitchen slowly, each footstep deliberate. Picked up the envelope with hands that had started to shake. No name on it, no address, no marking of any kind. It was heavier than it should be. Something solid inside. Something that made a faint sliding sound when I tilted it. Through the kitchen window, I could see my own reflection superimposed over the darkness outside. An old man holding an envelope in an empty house surrounded by 40 years of memories and 2 years of grief. And underneath all of that, buried so deep, I'd almost convinced myself it was gone 36 years of fear. Because I knew what this was. Not the specifics, not yet. But I knew in the way you know about cancer growing inside you before the doctors find it. I knew in the way Patricia had known those last few months, when she'd looked at me with eyes that said, "I'm sorry, and I love you, and I tried to protect you." The envelope felt like a judgment in my hands, like a bill coming due. I thought about Natalie's voice on the phone. "Are you alone?" I thought about the lie I'd told her, about Sheriff Monroe supposedly sitting in my living room, providing protection I just realized I might need. I thought about the way my son-in-law Brandon had been so helpful lately, so concerned. Always suggesting I might want to see a doctor, that my memory wasn't what it used to be, that the ranch was too much for a man my age to handle alone. The envelope waited. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the old windows. November in Wyoming was unforgiving. Cold that cut straight to the bone. Darkness that came early and stayed late. Perfect weather for secrets to surface, for the past to reach up through frozen ground and grab hold of the living. I should have opened it right there. Should have faced whatever was inside under the bright kitchen lights in the house where I'd lived an honest life for 40 years. Instead, I carried it to the kitchen table and set it down, stared at it for a long moment. Inside, I could feel something solid. A photograph, maybe. Or evidence of something I'd spent 36 years trying to forget. The envelope sat on the table between me and whatever came next. My hands trembled as I slid my finger under the flap. Inside was a photograph, old with that faded quality of real film from decades ago. And there I was, 36 years younger, standing in front of this very house. I'd been 31 then, lean, dark-haired, wearing work jeans and a shirt with rolled-up sleeves. A man who'd just gotten everything he'd ever wanted. Next to me stood Patricia. God, Patricia. 7 months pregnant with Natalie, wearing that yellow sundress she'd sewn herself because we couldn't afford maternity clothes. Her hand rested on her belly and she was smiling, really smiling, the way that lit up her whole face. 2 years she'd been gone, and the grief still hit like this. Unexpected. Devastating. But we weren't alone in the photograph. 2 others stood with us. A man in his late 40s wore a suit despite the summer heat, his hand on my shoulder in a way that looked friendly but felt like ownership. Howard Caldwell. I recognized him even after 36 years. Next to Howard stood a younger man. Tall, silver-haired even then, though he couldn't have been more than mid-30s. Expensive suit, cold eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. I didn't recognize him, but something about the way he stood slightly apart watching made my skin crawl. I turned the photograph over. Someone had written in neat block letters, "The Partnership." 1989. Some debts never expire. The words hit like ice water. 36 years I'd spent building a life on top of that choice. 36 years telling myself it was in the past, that we'd gotten away with it. Raised my daughter here. Loved my wife here. Buried her here. Some debts never expire. In 1989, I'd been a desperate young accountant in Boston, with a pregnant wife and dying dreams. I'd worked for Howard Caldwell doing books for his investment firm, and I'd discovered something I wasn't supposed to know. Instead of going to the police, I'd made a deal, a devil's bargain that gave Patricia and me this ranch, this life, this chance. And I'd promised myself I'd never look back, but someone hadn't forgotten. I stood fast, checked the back door, locked, front door, locked, every window secure. So how had someone gotten inside? Unless they had a key. Unless they'd been in my house while I sat 20 feet away talking to Natalie. The phone rang. I jumped, the photograph slipping from my fingers. Unknown caller. I picked up on the fourth ring. Hello, Mr. Fletcher. A man's voice, educated East Coast accent. My name is Lawrence Bennett. I'm an attorney calling from Boston. I apologize for the late hour, but I've been trying to reach you for quite some time. My throat tightened. How did you get this number? I'm executor of the estate of Howard and Beatrice Caldwell. I believe you knew them, Howard Caldwell, the man in the photograph. They're dead 6 months ago. Car accident in Maine. Bennett's voice carried professional sympathy, but something else underneath urgency. Mr. Fletcher, the Caldwells left specific instructions regarding you, a substantial bequest, documents, information I need to deliver personally. Why would they? Your daughter has been blocking my calls, Mr. Fletcher. Bennett's voice sharpened. For 6 months, every time I've tried to reach you, someone intercepted. Phone calls, letters. I finally had to resort to alternative means. The envelope, the photograph. That was you. My voice came out hoarse. You left that picture. No. The word dropped like a stone. I left letters with your daughter. Tried calling. That photograph? That's from someone else, Mr. Fletcher. Someone who wants you to know they haven't forgotten. And if I'm calling now, it means they're already making their move. My legs went weak. I grabbed the counter. Who? I can't discuss this over the phone. It's not safe. But Mr. Fletcher, Howard Caldwell died protecting a secret. Your secret, and the people he was protecting you from. They know about you now. They know about your daughter, Natalie. My voice cracked. What does she have to do with everything? Your daughter has been blocking my calls, Mr. Fletcher. The question is, does she know she's doing it, or is someone making sure you and I never speak? The words hung like poison. Outside, November wind rattled the windows. Inside, the house that had sheltered me for 36 years suddenly felt like a trap. Your daughter has been blocking my calls for months. Bennett repeated his tone, making it clear this wasn't just about missed messages. Which means someone close to you doesn't want you to know the truth. Someone who knows about 1989. Someone who's been planning this for a long time. The phone felt heavy in my hand, the attorney's words still hanging in the air like smoke. I pressed the handset tighter to my ear, my pulse hammering at my temples. What do you mean someone's been intercepting your calls? I demanded, keeping my voice steady despite the fear coiling in my chest. There was a pause on the other end, long enough for me to hear the faint rustle of paper, the distant hum of a city street. Lawrence Bennett sounded like a man who measured every word before he spoke. Mr. Fletcher, I've been trying to reach you for months. Letters, certified mail calls to your home number and your daughter's cell. Every attempt has been blocked, redirected, or simply vanished. I leaned back against the kitchen counter, my free hand gripping the edge hard enough to hurt. The photograph from 1989 lay face up on the table, the silver-haired man, staring out at me with that same cold, knowing smile. "Who are you, Mr. Bennett?" I asked quietly. "And why should I trust you?" Another pause. "Then, I'm the executor of Howard and Beatrice Caldwell's estate. They passed away in June of 2021, a car accident on Route 1 in Maine." My breath caught. Howard. The man I hadn't spoken to in 36 years. The man whose face I'd tried to forget every single night since 1989. I'm sorry to hear that." I managed, though the words felt hollow. "Thank you," Bennett replied, and I could hear the weight behind it. Genuine grief, not the rehearsed sympathy of a professional. "Howard was a good man, Mr. Fletcher. Whatever happened between you two in the past, he wanted to make things right. That's why he left you something in his will." I closed my eyes. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, the walls pressing in. What kind of something? $8.5 million. The number hit me like a punch to the gut. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. That can't be right," I whispered. "It is," Bennett said firmly. "The estate was settled 6 months ago. I've been trying to inform you ever since. But there's more, Mr. Fletcher, and it's not good." I opened my eyes, staring out the window at the dark silhouette of the stables, the horses barely visible in the cold November night. My hand was trembling. "Tell me." "Your daughter Natalie Fletcher filed a petition 3 weeks ago in Laramie County Family Court. She's seeking emergency guardianship over you, claiming you're suffering from severe cognitive decline, that you're no longer competent to manage your own affairs." The world tilted. I gripped the counter harder, my knuckles white. "That's not true," I said, my voice raw. "I'm 66 years old. I run a 200-acre horse ranch. I'm not—" "I know," Bennett interrupted gently. "I've done my homework, Mr. Fletcher. You're sharp. You pay your bills on time, you've never missed a tax filing, and you have a spotless credit record. But someone close to you is convincing your daughter otherwise. Someone who stands to gain a great deal if you're declared incompetent." Brandon. The name rose in my mind like bile. My son-in-law. The man who'd charmed Natalie 5 years ago, married her in a rushed courthouse ceremony, and moved into the house at the edge of the property 6 months after Patricia passed away. "I can't say more over the phone," Bennett continued, his voice dropping. "But I need to see you in person. Tonight. There are documents you need to review, documents that Howard left specifically for you. Evidence. Evidence of what? Of why someone would want to silence you." He paused, then added, "and why they might have already started." A chill ran down my spine. "Where?" I asked. "Your ranch. I'm driving up from Cheyenne now. I can be there by 1 o'clock in the morning. Can you meet me?" I glanced at the clock on the wall, 9:05 p.m., 4 hours. "I'll be here," I said. "Good. And Mr. Fletcher, don't take anything Brandon Hayes gives you between now and then." The line went dead. I stood there for a long moment, the phone still pressed to my ear, my mind racing. Then the dizziness hit. It came in waves, just like it had every night for the past 2 months. A slow, creeping fog that started at the base of my skull and spread forward, turning my thoughts sluggish and thick. My knees buckled slightly, and I grabbed the edge of the sink to steady myself. The vitamin bottle sat on the counter right where I'd left it after dinner. Brandon had brought it over 6 months ago, not long after I'd mentioned feeling tired. "Just a daily multivitamin, Warren," he'd said with that easy, trustworthy smile of his. "You're not getting any younger. Gotta take care of yourself." And I'd believed him. Every single night, I'd swallowed one of those little blue capsules with a glass of water, thinking I was doing something good for my body. But now, standing there in the dim light of my kitchen, the pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. The dizziness, the confusion, the nights when I'd lose track of time, wander into a room and forget why I was there. The mornings when I'd wake up groggy and disoriented, my mouth dry as sand. And Natalie's nightly calls, always at the same time, always with that same question. "Are you alone, Dad?" She wasn't checking on me out of love. She was checking to see if I was vulnerable. I looked down at the vitamin bottle, my stomach churning. That bastard. Brandon wasn't just manipulating Natalie. He was drugging me. I had less than 4 hours before Bennett arrived. 4 hours to find whatever Howard Caldwell had left for me and to stay conscious long enough to use it. My hand was still trembling as I set the vitamin bottle in the trash can under the sink, burying it beneath crumpled napkins and coffee grounds. I didn't know how much of that poison was still in my system, but I wasn't about to take any more. The house felt different now. Heavier. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind against the windows reminded me that I was running out of time. I needed answers. And there was only one place I hadn't looked. Patricia's office. The door stood at the end of the hallway, closed as it had been for the past 2 years. I'd walked past it 1,000 times since she'd been gone, but I'd never been able to bring myself to go inside. It was the one room in the house that still felt like hers. The one place where I could pretend she was just downstairs, reading by the fire, waiting for me to come find her. But tonight I didn't have the luxury of grief. I pushed the door open. The scent hit me first. Faint like a memory half forgotten. Lavender. Her perfume. It clung to the curtains, the books, the leather chair behind her mahogany desk. For a moment I couldn't breathe. I stood in the doorway, one hand on the frame, staring at the room as if she might suddenly appear and ask me what I was doing there. But she didn't. The office was exactly as she'd left it. Her reading glasses sat folded on the desk beside a stack of unopened mail. A framed photograph of the two of us, taken on our wedding day 43 years ago, smiled out from the bookshelf. The filing cabinet in the corner stood slightly ajar, a single manila folder peeking out from the top drawer. I forced myself to move. The desk first. I pulled open the drawers one by one, sifting through old receipts, handwritten notes, a half-finished crossword puzzle. Nothing. The filing cabinet yielded tax returns, veterinary records for the horses, copies of property deeds. Still nothing. My frustration was mounting. Bennett had said Howard left evidence, something that would explain why someone wanted me silenced. But where would Patricia have hidden it? I leaned back against the desk, scanning the room. Think Warren. If Patricia knew about the danger, if she'd been trying to protect you, where would she? My gaze landed on the photograph. Our wedding day. Patricia in her white dress, me in my best suit, both of us grinning like fools. We'd been so young then, so naive. I picked up the frame, my thumb brushing over the glass, and felt something shift. The back of the frame was loose. My heart kicked hard against my ribs. I turned it over, prying open the small metal clips that held the backing in place. The cardboard slid free and something fell onto the desk with a soft clink. A key. It was small brass engraved with a number 247. Beneath it, tucked inside the frame, was a folded piece of paper. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I unfolded it carefully, and Patricia's handwriting, neat, steady, unmistakable, stared up at me. Warren, I know about the danger. This key opens safe deposit box 247, First National Bank, Cheyenne. Go alone. Be careful. Love, P. I read it 3 times. 4. The words blurred as my vision swam. She knew. Patricia had known about the danger before she passed away. She'd known about Howard, about the photograph, about whatever secret I'd buried 36 years ago. and she'd left me away to find the truth. The grief I'd been holding back for 2 years crashed over me all at once. I sank into her chair, the letter clutched in my hand, and let the weight of it crush me. She'd been trying to protect me, even as she was slipping away, even in her final days. She'd been thinking of me, and I hadn't known. I hadn't been there for her the way she'd been there for me, but I could be here now. I could find whatever she'd hidden in that safe deposit box. I could finish what she'd started. I folded the letter carefully, slipping it into my shirt pocket along with the key. My resolve hardened like steel. I stood turning toward the door and froze. Headlights swept across the window, bright and sudden, cutting through the darkness outside. The low rumble of an engine filled the silence, followed by the crunch of tires on gravel. I moved to the window, peering out through the gap in the curtains. A black SUV was pulling into the driveway. Brandon's SUV. My stomach dropped. I glanced at the clock on Patricia's desk. 11 p.m. He was 2 hours early, 2 hours before Bennett was supposed to arrive. The SUV came to a stop in front of the house, the engine cutting off. The driver's side door opened, and Brandon stepped out, his silhouette backlit by the porch light. He stood there for a moment, staring up at the house, his hands in his pockets. Then he started walking toward the front door. I heard the key slide into the lock before I heard his voice. The front door swung open, and Brandon's footsteps echoed through the hallway, confident, unhurried, like he owned the place. I stood frozen in Patricia's office. My hand pressed flat against the brass key and folded letter in my shirt pocket. My heart hammering against my ribs. His voice was warm, concerned, the same tone he'd used 100 times before. "Natalie's really worried about you. She asked me to come check on you." I didn't answer. I moved quickly, silently crossing the office to the door. My fingers found the old brass lock and turned it with a soft click. It wasn't much, just a flimsy interior lock that wouldn't hold against a determined man, but it would buy me time. I pressed my ear to the door, listening. Brandon's footsteps moved through the living room, then the kitchen. I could hear drawers opening, cabinet doors closing. He was looking for something, or someone. Oren. His voice was closer now, just outside the hallway. "Come on, man. I know you're here. Your truck's in the driveway." I held my breath. The footsteps stopped outside Patricia's office. The doorknob rattled once, twice. Then silence. "Warren." Brandon's voice had changed. The warmth was gone, replaced by something flat and cold. "I know you lied about the sheriff. Monroe hasn't been out here in weeks. I checked." My stomach twisted. Of course he'd checked. "Open the door," Brandon said quietly. "We need to talk about your condition." I stayed silent. My back pressed against the wall, my hand instinctively moving to the key in my pocket. Whatever was in that safe deposit box, Brandon couldn't know I had it. "Not yet." "Warren?" His voice dropped lower, more menacing. "You're not thinking clearly. You need help. Natalie and I are trying to protect you, but you're making it really difficult." I closed my eyes, forcing myself to breathe slowly, steadily. He was good. He almost sounded sincere. "I'm not going to ask again." Brandon's tone sharpened. "Open the door." I didn't move. The first kick hit the door like a thunderclap. The wood shuddered in its frame, and I stumbled back, my pulse spiking. The old lock rattled but held. Barely. Another kick. The frame cracked. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Brandon shouted, his voice raw with frustration. "There are people who want what you have, Warren. Dangerous people. People who have already harmed others to get it. You think you're safe? You think you can just hide in there and wait for someone to save you." A third kick. The lock splintered. I backed toward the window, my mind racing. He was going to break through, and when he did, I'd have nowhere to go. Listen to me. Brandon's voice cracked through the door. You don't understand what you're dealing with. These aren't small-time criminals. They're organized. They're ruthless. And if you don't cooperate, if you don't hand over what they want, Natalie's going to be in danger too. Is that what you want? You want your daughter to get hurt because you're too stubborn to see reason. My breath caught. Natalie. He was threatening my daughter. The rage that surged through me was hot and sudden, burning away the fear. I pressed my hands flat against the desk to steady myself, my vision narrowing to a single crystalline point of clarity. Brandon wasn't just working for someone. He was working for him. The silver-haired man in the photograph. The man Howard had left evidence against. The man who'd been waiting 36 years for this moment. Sterling. Brandon kicked the door again, and this time the lock gave way with a sharp crack. The door swung inward, slamming against the wall, and Brandon filled the doorway, his chest heaving, his face flushed with anger. But I wasn't there. I was already at the window. Patricia's office was on the second floor overlooking the back porch and the stables beyond. The porch roof sloped gently downward, close enough to reach if I could swing my legs out and drop. Beyond that, the ground was maybe 10 or 12 feet down, far enough to hurt, but not far enough to stop me. Brandon's eyes locked onto mine across the room. For a split second, neither of us moved. Then I shoved the window open. Warren, don't... I didn't wait to hear the rest. I swung one leg over the sill, then the other, gripping the frame with both hands, as the cold November wind bit into my face. My boots scraped against the shingles, and for one terrifying moment I thought I was going to slip. But I didn't. I let go of the frame and slid down the slope of the porch roof, my hands scrabbling for purchase. My shoulder hit the edge of the gutter pane, shooting through my arm, but I kept moving. I dropped off the edge and landed hard on the frozen grass below my knees, buckling. Above me, Brandon's silhouette filled the window, backlit by the light from the office. "You're making a mistake, Warren," he shouted. I didn't look back. I pushed myself upright, ignoring the sharp ache in my legs, and started running toward the stables. The key and the letter pressed hard against my chest with every step, a constant reminder of what I was fighting for. At 66, climbing out windows wasn't on my to-do list, but being harmed by my son-in-law was even less appealing. The shingles scraped against my palms as I lowered myself down the slope of the porch roof, every joint in my body screaming in protest. My boots slipped once, twice, and I thought for sure I was going to tumble head first into the darkness below. But I caught myself on the gutter, the cold metal biting into my fingers, and held on. Behind me inside the office, I heard the final crack of the door giving way. Wood splintered, the lock shattered, and Brandon's heavy footsteps thundered across the floor. I didn't look back. I let go of the gutter and dropped. The ground rushed up to meet me, and I hit hard, my right hip taking most of the impact. Pain exploded through my side, white-hot and sharp, and I crumpled onto the frozen grass with a grunt. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My vision swam, and I thought I might black out. But then I heard Brandon's voice above me, raw with fury. "You foolish old man." I forced myself upright, biting down on the pain, and stumbled toward the stables. My hip throbbed with every step, but adrenaline kept me moving. The darkness swallowed me as I ducked inside the stable door, the familiar scent of hay and horses flooding my senses. I pressed myself against the wall, my chest heaving, and listened. Brandon's footsteps pounded across the porch above, then down the back steps. He was coming after me. Of course he was. I crept deeper into the stables, past the stalls where the horses shifted and snorted in the darkness. My hand brushed against the rough wood of the nearest stall, and I crouched low behind it, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. The back door slammed open. Warren! Brandon's voice echoed through the stable, sharp and commanding. You can't run from this. You don't know what you're dealing with. I stayed silent, my hand pressed over my mouth to muffle the sound of my breathing. The key and the letter were still tucked safely in my shirt pocket, pressed against my chest, like a talisman. Brandon's footsteps moved through the stable, slow and deliberate. I could hear him checking each stall one by one, his breathing heavy and frustrated. Then his phone rang. The sound was sharp and sudden, cutting through the silence like a blade. Brandon swore under his breath and answered it. Yes, he said, his voice clipped. He knows. A pause. I strained to hear the other side of the conversation, but all I could make out was the faint murmur of a man's voice, low, cold, authoritative. He found something, Brandon continued. I don't know what yet. A letter, maybe. Or a key. Another pause. Brandon's tone shifted, defensive now. No, I don't have it yet. He locked himself in the office and climbed out the window before I could stop him. The voice on the other end rose slightly, and Brandon flinched. I'll keep looking, he said quickly. He can't have gone far. I'll find him. He ended the call and shoved the phone into his pocket, muttering a curse. Then he turned and stalked back toward the house, his footsteps fading into the night. I waited until I couldn't hear him anymore. Then I waited another full minute just to be sure. When I finally moved, my legs were stiff and aching, and my hip still throbbed like a bruise. But I didn't have time to rest. I needed to get out of here. I needed to get to Bennett. I crept toward the front of the stables, staying low, and peered out into the darkness. The house was lit up like a beacon, every window glowing, and I could see Brandon's silhouette moving through the living room. He was searching, tearing the place apart, and then I saw the headlights. Two bright beams cutting through the night, slicing down the long gravel driveway toward the house. A car, sleek, silver, expensive. A Mercedes. Bennett. He was early. An hour early. The Mercedes pulled to a stop in front of the house, the engine purring softly, and the driver's side door opened. A man stepped out, tall, lean, dressed in a dark overcoat. Even from a distance, I could see the sharp lines of his face, the careful way he carried himself. Lawrence Bennett. Brandon must have heard the car because he came out onto the porch, his expression tight and wary. He crossed his arms over his chest, blocking the doorway, and said something I couldn't hear. Bennett replied, his tone calm but firm, and the two men stood there in the driveway, locked in what looked like a tense standoff. This was my chance. I moved quickly, keeping to the shadows, circling around the back of the stables and crossing the open yard toward the driveway. My hips screamed with every step, but I gritted my teeth and kept going. The key in my pocket felt like it weighed 100 pounds, pulling me forward. Bennett's back was to me, his attention focused on Brandon. I didn't have time to explain, didn't have time to warn him. I yanked open the passenger door of the Mercedes and threw myself inside. Bennett spun around, his hand going instinctively to his coat pocket, but I grabbed his arm. Drive, I said, my voice hoarse. Right now. For a split second, he stared at me, his eyes wide with shock. Then he nodded, slid back into the driver's seat, and slammed the door. Brandon shouted something and started running toward the car, but Bennett was already throwing the Mercedes into reverse. The tires spun on the gravel, and we shot backward down the driveway, the headlights sweeping wildly across the trees. Bennett shifted into drive and floored it, and we tore down the long driveway toward the main road, the engine roaring. I looked back through the rear window. Brandon was standing in the middle of the driveway, backlit by the porch lights, his phone pressed to his ear. Even from this distance, I could see the look on his face, cold, furious, and calculating. The look that promised this wasn't over. The highway stretched out ahead of us, dark and empty, the yellow lines rushing past in the glare of the Mercedes's headlights. My hands were still shaking, adrenaline coursing through my veins like electricity. Every few seconds I glanced in the side mirror, half expecting to see Brandon's SUV tearing up the road behind us. But there was nothing. Just darkness. Bennett drove with the calm precision of a man who'd done this before, one hand on the wheel, the other resting loosely on the gearshift. He glanced over at me, his expression unreadable. "You okay?" he asked. I let out a shaky breath. "Define okay." He almost smiled. "Fair enough." I studied him in the dim glow of the dashboard lights. He was younger than I'd expected, mid-40s maybe, with sharp features and a quiet intensity that reminded me of soldiers I'd known back in my day. There was something about the way he carried himself, the way he moved, that didn't quite fit the image of a Boston attorney. "You said you were a lawyer," I said. But you're something else too, aren't you?" Bennett's jaw tightened slightly. "I was a medic, Army. Did 2 tours in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan. When I came back, I went to law school. Figured I'd seen enough people hurt. Thought maybe I could help them a different way." I nodded slowly. That explained the calm under pressure, the steady hands. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for coming early." "Howard made me promise," Bennett replied. "He said if anything ever happened to him, I was supposed to find you. Make sure you knew the truth." The truth. I wasn't sure I was ready for it. We turned off the highway onto a 2-lane road, and within minutes, the neon sign of the Prairie Stop Diner came into view, a faded red glow against the black Wyoming sky. The parking lot was nearly empty, just a couple of big rigs idling near the back, and a beat-up pickup truck near the entrance. Bennett pulled into a spot near the side door and cut the engine. The sudden silence was deafening. "Come on," he said. "We need to talk somewhere safe." Inside the diner was exactly what you'd expect from a place that stayed open 24 hours, fluorescent lights, vinyl booths, and the smell of burnt coffee and fried food. A tired-looking waitress glanced up from behind the counter, gave us a nod, and went back to refilling the sugar dispensers. Bennett led me to a corner booth in the back, away from the windows. We slid into opposite seats, and he waved the waitress over. "2 coffees. Black." She nodded and disappeared into the kitchen. I leaned forward, keeping my voice low. "Tell me what's going on. All of it." Bennett pulled a manila folder from his briefcase and set it on the table between us. "Howard Caldwell was a good man, Warren. But he made some bad choices a long time ago, and when he realized those choices were going to catch up with him, he did everything he could to make it right." "What kind of choices?" Bennett opened the folder and slid a photograph across the table. It was the same one I'd found in the envelope earlier, the 4 of us standing together in 1989. Howard, Patricia, me, and the silver-haired man. "This man," Bennett said, tapping the silver-haired figure. "His name is Dominic Sterling. He's the reason Howard's gone, and he's the reason you're in danger." My stomach twisted. "Who is he?" "A very dangerous man. Organized crime, money laundering, extortion. He's been operating for over 40 years, and he's very good at covering his tracks." Bennett's voice was steady, clinical. "Howard knew Sterling was going to come for him. So he made an emergency will left you $8.5 million and set up a contingency plan." "Why me?" I asked. Why not just go to the police?" "Because you have something Sterling wants. Evidence. Proof of what he did back in 1989. Howard hid it, and he told Patricia where to find it." I froze. "Patricia." Bennett nodded slowly. "Howard didn't send the information to you, Warren. He sent it to Patricia. He thought she'd be safer, less obvious. He didn't know." He trailed off, his expression darkening. "Didn't know what?" My voice was barely a whisper. The waitress returned with 2 mugs of coffee, set them down, and left without a word. Bennett waited until she was out of earshot before continuing. Patricia received Howard's letter about 6 months before she passed away. She didn't tell you because she was trying to protect you. She started investigating Sterling on her own, quietly, carefully. But Sterling has eyes everywhere. He found out. My chest tightened. What are you saying? Bennett met my eyes, and I saw something in his gaze that made my blood run cold. Your wife had cancer, Warren. Stage 3, treatable, manageable. But over the course of just a few months, it progressed faster than any of her doctors could explain. Faster than it should have. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles white. Sterling has connections. People in hospitals, pharmaceutical companies, research labs. He's done it before. Manipulated treatments, accelerated conditions. Made it look natural. Bennett's voice was quiet, but each word hit me like a hammer. Patricia didn't just pass away, Warren. She was targeted, harmed in a way that left no trace. I couldn't breathe. The diner walls pressed in around me, the fluorescent lights too bright, too harsh. Patricia, my Patricia, the woman I'd loved for 43 years. The woman who'd held my hand through every storm, who'd built a life with me on that ranch. She hadn't just slipped away. She'd been taken from me. Warren! Bennett's voice cut through the fog. I'm sorry. I know this is... Show me the evidence. I said, my voice hard as stone. Bennett hesitated, then reached into his briefcase and pulled out a slim tablet. He powered it on, tapped the screen a few times, and slid it across the table to me. Howard recorded this 2 weeks before he and Beatrice were gone. It's a full confession. Everything he knew about Sterling, about 1989, about what happened to Patricia. I stared down at the screen. A video was queued up, the thumbnail showing an elderly man sitting in a dimly lit room. Howard Caldwell. Older, frailer than I remembered, but unmistakably him. My hand trembled as I pressed play. The video flickered to life. Howard's face filled the screen, his eyes tired and sad. Warren? He said, his voice rough with age. If you're watching this, I'm gone, and I'm sorry. Howard paused, his eyes glistening in the dim light. Behind him, I could see the edge of a bookshelf, a lamp casting long shadows. The timestamp in the corner read June 14th, 2021. He cleared his throat and continued. Warren, I need to tell you something I should have told you 36 years ago. Something I've carried every single day since. His voice was hoarse, tired, like a man who'd been running for too long, and finally stopped. In 1989, I was managing a real estate development firm in Boston. Caldwell Properties. Legitimate work, or so I told myself. But in March of that year, a man named Dominic Sterling walked into my office. My chest tightened at the name. Sterling had $6.1 million that needed to disappear, Howard said. Money from extortion, illegal gambling operations, offshore accounts that couldn't stay offshore. He needed it laundered through legitimate channels, and he offered me 10% to make it happen. Howard's gaze dropped, shame flickering across his face. I said yes. We set up shell companies, fake real estate transactions, falsified property appraisals, offshore transfers. The money moved through the system in pieces. Deposits, withdrawals, transfers small enough to avoid federal alerts. By August, it was done. $6.1 million clean. I felt Bennett's eyes on me from across the booth, but I couldn't look away from the screen. Sterling paid me my cut, Howard continued. And I thought that was the end of it. I thought I could walk away, pretend it never happened. He leaned closer to the camera, his expression darkening. But you found out, Warren. My breath caught. You were working for Hammond and Associates, the accounting firm we hired to finalize the paperwork. You were supposed to be nobody, a junior accountant fresh out of college buried in a cubicle. But you were smart. Too smart. I remembered. I'd been 31, underpaid, overworked, stuck, reviewing endless spreadsheets while Patricia waited at home 8 months pregnant with Natalie. And then I'd seen a single discrepancy in a property appraisal. One number that didn't match. One thread that unraveled everything. You came to me in September, Howard said. You didn't go to the police. You didn't go to the feds. You came straight to my office with a folder full of evidence, every transaction, every falsified document, every shell company. You had us cold. The words hit me like ice water. I'd tried to forget that day. The way Howard's hands had trembled as he flipped through my notes. The way his face had gone pale. You told me you had a choice. Howard said quietly. Turn us in and collect whatever reward the government offered. Or take something else. Something that would change your life. The ranch. The 200-acre horse ranch in Wyoming that Patricia and I had dreamed about, but could never afford. You wanted out, Howard said. Out of Boston, out of the rat race, out of the life you were stuck in, and you were willing to keep quiet if we gave you away. My jaw tightened. Hearing it said out loud, so cold, so transactional, made my stomach turn. Sterling and I made you a deal. We bought you that ranch in Wyoming, paid off the deed, transferred it into your name, clean and legal. Plus 5 years of living expenses enough to get you started build a new life, and in exchange you'd destroy the evidence you'd compiled and never speak a word. Howard's expression shifted, something almost like respect crossing his face. But you didn't destroy it, did you? I closed my eyes. You made copies. Kept them as insurance just in case we ever came after you. Smart. His voice dropped. You buried it somewhere safe. Somewhere Sterling and I would never think to look. And for 36 years you kept your word. You never said a thing. The screen flickered and Howard's tone hardened. But you also kept the evidence. And 3 years ago, the FBI reopened their investigation into Sterling's operations. New evidence, new leads. They started digging into the 1989 transactions, and Sterling realized it was only a matter of time before they found the trail back to you. My hands clenched into fists. So he started cleaning up. Eliminating anyone who could tie him to those transactions. Howard's voice cracked. Beatrice and I were first on his list. We knew too much and Sterling couldn't risk us talking. He looked down, his shoulders sagging. I tried to warn people. I tried to stop it, but I was too late. A pause, then his voice dropped to barely a whisper. I'm sorry about Patricia Warren. I know Bennett told you what happened, what Sterling did to her. It's my fault. All of it. She was trying to protect you and I. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. The $8.5 million I'm leaving you, it's everything I have left. It'll never be enough, but it's all I can give. Howard took a shaky breath, then leaned forward, his expression urgent. Warren, listen to me. Sterling knows you still have the evidence, and he's already made his move. My pulse spiked. Your son-in-law, Brandon Hayes. Sterling approached him 6 months ago, paid off his gambling debts over $300,000, promised him more money if he'd get close to you, gain your trust. Brandon's been drugging you, Warren, slipping sedatives into your vitamins, making you confused, disoriented. He's been manipulating Natalie, convincing her you're suffering from cognitive decline, so he can get you declared incompetent. Once he has control of your property, he'll find the evidence and hand it over to Sterling. The words slammed into me like a freight train. Brandon. Working for Sterling. For 6 months. The evidence you buried 36 years ago, it's still there, Howard said. Under the cottonwood tree. The oldest one on your property, the one we planted together the day you moved in. Everything you need to bring Sterling down is in that box. Financial records, cassette recordings, ledgers, testimony, enough to put him away for the rest of his life. Howard's face filled the screen one last time, his eyes pleading. Find it, Warren. Dig it up. Give it to the FBI. And whatever you do, don't trust Brandon. He's not on your side. He never was. He paused, his voice breaking. I'm sorry. For all of it. I hope you can survive what I couldn't. The video ended. The screen went black. I sat there staring at the blank tablet, my mind reeling. The cottonwood tree. The evidence I'd buried 36 years ago and tried to forget. The ranch I'd built my entire life on, bought with blood money and silence. And Brandon, my son-in-law. The man married to my daughter. Working for the man who'd taken Patricia from me. Bennett was watching me, his expression grim. Warren, he said quietly. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed on the table, the screen lighting up. I looked down. Natalie. My hand felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds as I picked up the phone. Natalie's name glowed on the screen, and for a moment I just stared at it. Across the booth, Bennett was watching me, his expression unreadable. He gave a single, subtle nod. I pressed the green button and lifted the phone to my ear. Natalie, it's Dad. Her voice cracked, strained like she'd been crying. Dad, where are you? Brandon came home and said you suddenly disappeared. Your truck's still at the house, but you're gone. Are you okay? The worry in her voice sounded real, genuine. It cut straight through me. I'm safe, I said, keeping my voice steady. Safe. She let out a shaky laugh that sounded more like a sob. Dad, it's past 1 a.m. Brandon said he found the office door broken and the window wide open. He's terrified you hurt yourself climbing out. I closed my eyes. Of course that's what Brandon told her. Of course he'd twisted into me being a confused old man wandering off in the middle of the night. I didn't hurt myself, I said carefully. I left because I had to. Had to. Her voice rose, frustration bleeding through the concern. Dad, you're 66 years old. It's the middle of the night. Where could you possibly have to be? Across the table, Bennett leaned forward slightly, his eyes locked on mine. He shook his head once. A warning. I swallowed hard. Natalie, I need to ask you something. The lawyer who's been trying to reach me, Lawrence Bennett. Why did you block his calls? There was a long pause. What? Natalie sounded genuinely confused. Dad. I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't block anyone's calls. Bennett said he's been trying to contact me for months. Letters, certified mail, phone calls to the house. He said someone's been intercepting them. Dad. Natalie's voice softened and I heard the pity in it. The sadness. I don't know who told you that, but I haven't blocked anything. Brandon's been helping manage your calls and mail since your memory started having issues. He thought it would be easier for you, less overwhelming. The words hit me like cold water. Brandon's been helping manage your calls. Brandon's been handling everything. Of course he had. Of course Natalie didn't know she was blocking Bennett. She didn't know because Brandon had been doing it behind her back, using her concern for me as cover. Natalie, I said slowly, choosing each word carefully. What has Brandon told you about my memory? She hesitated. Dad, we've talked about this before. You've been forgetting things, losing track of time. Sometimes you don't remember conversations we've had just days ago. Brandon said it's normal at your age, but we need to make sure you're safe. Safe. I repeated, my voice flat. A care facility, Natalie said quietly. Somewhere with trained staff who can look after you properly. Make sure you're eating right, taking your medication, not climbing out of windows in the middle of the night. A care facility, a nursing home, somewhere Brandon could stash me while he tore the ranch apart looking for the evidence. My hand tightened around the phone until my knuckles ached. Then her tone shifted, just slightly, harder. Dad, we're just trying to help. The guardianship, the care facility, it's all to protect you. And the ranch, too. She paused, then added, it needs to be managed properly. The word hit me like a slap. Properly. Not, you need to be cared for. Not, we're worried about you. The ranch needs to be managed. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Bennett was watching me closely now, his eyes narrowed. Natalie? I said, my voice careful. What do you mean, managed properly? Another pause. Longer this time. I just mean, Dad, you're struggling. You can't run a 200-acre ranch by yourself anymore. Brandon and I have been talking, and we think it might be time to make some decisions about the property, about your care, about what's best for everyone. What's best for everyone, not what's best for you. My throat tightened. I wanted to shout. I wanted to tell her everything about Brandon, about Sterling, about the poison he'd been slipping into my vitamins for months. But Bennett was shaking his head again, more urgently this time. His finger touched his lips. Silence. Natalie, I said, forcing the words out past the knot in my chest. I need you to do something for me. Dad, please just come home. We can figure this out together. I need you to stay away from Brandon tonight. What, Dad? That doesn't make any sense. Stay away from Brandon tonight. My voice came out louder than I intended, sharp enough to make the waitress behind the counter look up. The few late-night truckers glanced over, then quickly looked away. Dad, you're scaring me. Good. You should be scared. And I hung up. The phone felt like a brick in my hand. I set it down on the table, my whole body trembling. Across from me, Bennett was already standing, pulling bills from his wallet and dropping them onto the table. We need to go, he said quietly. Now. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak, and then my phone buzzed again. I looked down, a text message glowing on the dark screen. Natalie, Dad, please. Brandon and I are coming to find you. We just want to help. Please don't run anymore. The words blurred as I stared at them. Brandon and I are coming to find you. She was with him. Right now. In the car. On their way. And she'd talked about the ranch like it was a problem that needed solving, like it was property that needed managing. I looked up at Bennett, my chest hollow. She's with him, I whispered. Bennett's jaw tightened. He grabbed his briefcase and coat. Then we moved fast. The bank. Now, the streets of downtown Cheyenne were empty at 1:30 in the morning. Bennett drove fast, but careful, his eyes flicking to the rearview mirror every few seconds. I kept mine on the side mirror, watching for headlights that never came. When we pulled up to First National Bank, a figure was already waiting by the side entrance, a man in his mid-40s bundled in a heavy coat, his breath misting in the cold night air. Norman Ellis. Bennett had called him during the drive, waking him from sleep with a single sentence. I need a favor. Now. Ellis unlocked the side door without a word and ushered us inside. The bank lobby was dark, silent, except for the hum of the heating system. He led us past the teller stations, through a security door and down a narrow hallway to the vault. The vault door was massive steel, at least a foot thick, with a combination lock that Ellis spun through quickly, his fingers moving from memory. The heavy door swung open with a low groan, and we stepped inside. Rows of safe deposit boxes lined the walls, each one marked with a brass plate and number. Ellis pulled a ring of keys from his pocket and moved to the far wall, scanning the numbers until he found it. 247. This one, he asked. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. Ellis inserted his master key into the top lock. I pulled Patricia's key from my shirt pocket, the small brass key I'd found hidden in her wedding photo frame, and slid it into the bottom lock. We turned them together. The door clicked open. Ellis pulled the long metal box from its slot and set it on the small table in the center of the vault. Then he stepped back, giving us space. Take your time, he said quietly. I'll keep watch out front. He left and the vault door swung halfway closed behind him. I stared down at the box. My hands were shaking. Bennett put a hand on my shoulder. You ready? I opened the lid. Inside, arranged carefully, were the pieces of my past. 10 floppy disks, 3.5 inch, the kind I hadn't seen in decades. Each one was labeled in Patricia's neat handwriting, Caldwell Properties 1 to 10. 8 cassette tapes, also labeled, dated from March through August 1989. A leather-bound journal, worn and yellowed at the edges, filled with handwritten notes and photocopied documents. And at the top, folded carefully, a single sheet of paper. Patricia's handwriting. I picked it up with trembling fingers and unfolded it. My dearest Warren, if you're reading this, then you've found the key and the box. I'm so sorry I couldn't tell you in person. I was trying to protect you. I always have. Howard Caldwell sent me a letter 6 months ago. He told me about Dominic Sterling. He told me what you did in 1989, the blackmail, the ranch, the evidence you buried. And he told me Sterling was coming to clean up the loose ends. I didn't tell you because I knew you'd try to protect me. You'd go to Sterling yourself, try to make a deal, try to take the blame. And I couldn't let that happen. So I started investigating on my own. I found enough to know Sterling is dangerous, more dangerous than either of us imagined. And I think, Warren, I think he knows I've been looking. I've felt it for weeks now. The treatments aren't working the way they should. The doctors can't explain it. But I know, I'm not going to survive this, Warren. I can feel it. And I'm so sorry. The evidence you buried in 1989 is still there. Under the first cottonwood tree we planted together, the one on the east side of the property. That's where the originals are. What's in this box are copies, backups I made from the materials Howard sent me. They might be enough to protect you. But if Sterling comes, you'll need the originals to truly bring him down. Warren, I need you to know something else. I'm very worried about Natalie. She's been asking questions lately about the ranch's value, about inheritance, about our finances. I thought it was just natural curiosity. But Brandon's been encouraging her, pushing her. I've seen the way he talks to her, the way he plants ideas in her head. I don't think he loves her, Warren. I think he's using her to get to you, to get to the ranch. Please protect our daughter from him. She doesn't see what I see. She doesn't understand what kind of man he really is. And if something happens to me, please don't let him take her too. I love you. I've loved you every single day since we met 43 years ago. You gave me a life I never dreamed I could have. You gave me Natalie. You gave me everything. Don't let guilt destroy you, Warren. You made a choice in 1989 because you were desperate and afraid. I understood. I forgave you the moment I learned, and I'd make the same choice 1,000 times if it meant having the life we built together. Live, Warren. Survive this, and take care of our girl. All my love, Patricia. The words blurred as my vision swam. My chest cracked open, and I couldn't hold it back anymore. I sank into the chair, the letter clutched in my hands, and I cried. For the first time in 2 years, I let myself break. I cried for Patricia, for the life she'd given up to protect me. I cried for the guilt I'd carried for 36 years. the weight of the choice I'd made. I cried for Natalie, for the daughter Patricia had tried to warn me about. Bennett stood silently beside me, one hand resting on my shoulder, saying nothing. When I finally managed to breathe again, I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into my pocket beside the key. She knew, I whispered. She knew about Natalie, about Brandon. Bennett nodded slowly. She was trying to protect you both. I looked down at the box, the discs, the tapes, the journal. Evidence of crimes committed 36 years ago. Evidence that could bring down Dominic Sterling. But they were copies. These won't be enough, will they? I asked. Bennett shook his head. They'll help, but Sterling's lawyers will tear them apart. Copies can be doctored faked. We need the originals. The originals. Buried under the cottonwood tree. On my ranch, where Brandon and Sterling were probably already searching. The vault door swung open, and Ellis stepped back inside, his face pale. We've got a problem, he said. His security feed just picked up a vehicle circling the block. Black sedan, tinted windows. They've passed 3 times in the last 5 minutes. Bennett and I exchanged a glance. Sterling, I said. Ellis nodded grimly. They're watching. I stood, my legs unsteady, but my resolve hardening like steel. We had the copies, but Sterling wouldn't stop. He'd never stop, not until he had the originals. Not until every piece of evidence that could tie him to 1989 was gone. Which meant we had to go back. Back to the ranch. Back to the cottonwood tree. Back into the lion's den. Bennett drove like a man possessed, the Mercedes tearing down the dark highway toward the ranch. The yellow lines blurred past in the glare of the headlights, and every few seconds I glanced at the side mirror, half expecting to see Sterling's black sedan following us. But the road behind us stayed empty. My hands were shaking. I pressed them flat against my thighs, trying to steady myself, but the tremor wouldn't stop. Patricia's letter was folded in my pocket. Her words burned into my mind. I'm very worried about Natalie. Brandon is influencing her. Please protect our daughter from him. What if I was too late? What if Natalie was already at the ranch with Brandon helping him search? What if my own daughter had chosen money over me? Bennett's voice cut through my thoughts. I'm calling Monroe. He pulled his phone from his coat pocket, kept one hand on the wheel, and dialed. The call connected after 2 rings. Sheriff Monroe. The voice on the other end was gruff, still thick with sleep. Frank, it's Lawrence Bennett. I need your help. Now. There was a pause, then Monroe's tone sharpened. Sir Bennett, it's 2 a.m. What's going on? I'm with Warren Fletcher. We're heading to his ranch. There's a situation, dangerous people on the property. We need backup, but no sirens. Do not use sirens. If they hear you coming, someone could get hurt. Dangerous people, Warren, you there? I leaned toward the phone. I'm here, Frank. What the hell's going on? Just trust us, Bennett said. How fast can you get to the Fletcher ranch? Monroe swore under his breath. I'm in town. 20 minutes, maybe 25. I'll bring 2 deputies. No lights, no sirens. Thank you. Bennett ended the call and immediately dialed again. This time, the voice that answered was crisp, professional. Agent Palmer. Judith, it's Bennett. I need the bureau, now. Bennett. Agent Judith Palmer's voice sharpened. What's happening? I'm with Warren Fletcher. We have evidence in the Dominic Sterling case, financial records recordings, the works. But Sterling's men are at Fletcher's ranch right now. They're looking for the originals. Sterling's there physically. We believe so. We're 5 minutes out. Palmer swore. I'm in Denver. 45 minutes minimum, and that's if I fly. Can you wait? We can't. If we wait, they'll find the evidence first, or they'll harm Fletcher. Another pause. Then Palmer's voice came back hard and commanding. Do not engage. Do you hear me? Get eyes on the situation, but do not engage until I have units on site. I'm mobilizing now. Understood. Bennett hung up and tossed the phone onto the dash. He glanced at me, his jaw tight. 45 minutes, he said. I nodded. We don't have 45 minutes. I know. The ranch came into view ahead, a dark silhouette against the black Wyoming sky, the main house barely visible in the starlight. Bennett killed the headlights half a mile out and slowed the Mercedes to a crawl. The engine purred softly as we rolled down the gravel road, our approach masked by the wind. He pulled off onto the grass 100 yards from the house and cut the engine. Silence settled over us, thick and heavy. We sat there for a moment listening. Then I saw them. 2 vehicles parked near the house side by side. Brandon's black SUV and a sleek black sedan, long, low, expensive. German engineering, Sterlings. My stomach twisted. They're here, I whispered. Bennett nodded. He pointed toward the field beyond the house and I followed his gaze. Flashlights. 3 of them, maybe 4, sweeping back and forth across the open ground. The beams moved slowly, methodically, like predators hunting in the dark. They were searching for the cottonwood tree. They don't know which one yet, Bennett said quietly. There are at least a dozen cottonwoods on this property. The oldest one, I said. East side, near the fence line. Bennett nodded. And then we move fast, grab tools and circle around through the stables, come at it from behind. We slipped out of the car, closing the doors as quietly as we could. The cold November air bit at my face, sharp and biting. My breath misted in front of me as we crept toward the back of the property, staying low, moving through the shadows. The stables loomed ahead. Old wood, weathered and gray, the scent of hay and horses drifting through the night. I knew this place like I knew my own hands. Every board, every stall, every shadow. We ducked inside through the side door. The horses stirred at our approach, snorting softly, but they didn't panic. They knew me. Bennett found 2 shovels hanging on the wall near the tack room. He handed one to me and I gripped the worn wooden handle, the weight familiar in my hands. You ready? He asked. I nodded. We moved through the back of the stables, slipping out through the far door and into the open field beyond. The cottonwood tree stood 100 yards away, its bare branches reaching up toward the stars like skeletal fingers. The flashlights were still sweeping through the trees on the far side of the property, their voices faint and distant. Bennett and I ran. My legs ached. My hip throbbed where I'd landed when I jumped from the window hours ago. But I pushed through the pain, my boots crunching softly on the frozen grass, the shovel bouncing against my shoulder. We reached the cottonwood and dropped to our knees. This was it. The first tree Patricia and I had planted together 36 years ago, the day we moved onto the ranch. The day we started our new life with blood money and silence. And beneath it, 5 feet down, buried in a waterproof metal box, was the evidence that could end Dominic Sterling forever. I drove the shovel into the frozen ground. The blade bit into the dirt with a dull thunk, and pain shot through my hands. The ground was hard, frozen solid by weeks of Wyoming winter. Every strike of the shovel sent jolts up my arms. But I kept going. Bennett dug beside me, his breath coming in sharp bursts, misting in the cold. 5 feet deep. We had maybe 10 minutes before the flashlights found us. Maybe less. The ground fought us every inch of the way. Wyoming winter had frozen the earth solid, turning the dirt into something closer to concrete than soil. Every strike of the shovel sent jolts of pain shooting up my arms, rattling my teeth. My hands were already blistering the worn wooden handle slick with sweat despite the freezing air. Bennett dug beside me, his breath coming in sharp, ragged bursts. Neither of us spoke. We didn't have the breath to waste. 2 feet down. 3. The hole widened slowly, agonizingly. I could feel time slipping away like sand through my fingers. Every scrape of the shovel, every clump of frozen dirt we tossed aside, felt like it took an eternity. My back screamed, my shoulders burned, but I kept digging. 3.5 feet. Then I heard it. Voices. Faint at first, drifting across the field on the cold wind. But getting closer. I froze my shovel halfway into the ground. Bennett did the same. The flashlights were moving again, sweeping back and forth, methodical and relentless, like searchlights hunting for prey, and they were heading in our direction. "Keep going." Bennett hissed, his voice barely a whisper. I drove the shovel down again. And again. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. 4 feet. The voices were louder now, close enough that I could make out words. Waste of time. Old man probably buried it somewhere else. Sterling said to check every tree on the property, so we check every tree. And then cutting through the others, a voice I knew. Brandon. "Check that big tree over there, the one on the east side. Old man always liked symbolic things." My blood turned to ice. He knew. He knew which tree. The flashlight beams swung toward us, sweeping across the field. In seconds, they'd see us. "Bennett," I whispered. "I know. Keep digging." 4.5 feet. My shovel hit something soft. Roots thick and tangled, snaking through the dirt like veins. I hacked at them with the edge of the blade, my hands raw and bleeding now, the blisters torn open. The flashlights were so close I could hear their boots crunching on the frozen grass. 5 feet, and then clang. The shovel struck something solid. Something that wasn't dirt or rock or root. Metal. My heart nearly stopped. Bennett dropped to his knees, shoving the dirt aside with his bare hands. I did the same, my fingers numb and clumsy, clawing at the frozen earth until I felt it cold, smooth, unmistakable. A metal box. It was big, heavy, waterproof with thick rubber seals along the edges. The kind of box you'd use to bury something you never wanted found. I grabbed the handle and pulled. It didn't budge. Bennett grabbed the other side, and together we heaved. The box shifted dirt, cascading off its surface, and then it broke free with a wet, sucking sound. We pulled it up and out of the hole, and for one wild, impossible moment, I thought we'd actually done it. We'd beaten them. And then the flashlight hit my face. Blinding. White hot. So bright I couldn't see anything but the beam burning into my eyes. "Well, well," a voice said from somewhere behind the light. "Found it." I heard the metallic click of a safety being flipped off. The flashlight lowered slightly and I could finally see. Brandon stood at the edge of the hole, a pistol in his right hand, the beam of his flashlight in his left. His face was hard cold. Nothing like the man who'd smiled at me across Thanksgiving dinners and Christmas mornings. He looked down at me with something close to pity. "You should have stayed gone, Warren." Footsteps crunched on the frozen ground behind him, and a second figure stepped into view. Dominic Sterling. He was exactly as I remembered from the photograph, tall, lean, silver-haired. But where the photo had captured him, at 34 sharp and hungry, the man standing before me now was 70 years old. His face was lined, his hair thin, but his eyes were the same. Cold, calculating, predatory. He wore an expensive suit, wool, and perfectly tailored, like he'd just stepped out of a boardroom instead of a frozen field in the middle of the night. His hands were tucked casually into his coat pockets, and he smiled down at me like a teacher who'd caught a student cheating on a test. "Mr. Fletcher," he said, his voice smooth and cultured. "Howard Caldwell spoke very highly of you. He said you were one of the smartest men he'd ever met. Smart enough to see an opportunity and take it. Smart enough to keep your mouth shut for 36 years. I said nothing. My hands were still gripping the metal box, my knuckles white. Sterling took a step closer, his shoes crunching softly on the dirt. "Howard also said smart men know when to quit, when to walk away, when to accept that they've lost." He crouched down at the edge of the hole, his eyes level with mine now. Up close, I could see the lines etched deep into his face, the coldness in his gaze like frost on glass. "You've had a good run, Warren. 36 years of peace, a beautiful ranch, a family. That's more than most men in your position ever get. You should be grateful, grateful." My voice came out hoarse, raw. "You took my wife from me." Sterling's smile didn't waver. Patricia made her choice. She could have stayed out of it, but she didn't. And now here we are. He straightened, brushing imaginary dirt from his coat. "Give me the box, Warren. Walk away. I'll even let you keep the ranch. You've earned that much." I stared up at him, my chest tight, my hands shaking. And then I heard it. Faint at first. Distant, but growing louder. An engine. Sterling heard it too. His head snapped toward the sound, his eyes narrowing. Brandon spun around his flashlight, sweeping across the field toward the driveway. Headlights appeared in the distance, low, dark, moving slowly without the glare of high beams. Someone was coming. Sterling's jaw tightened. He looked back down at me, and for the first time, I saw something flicker across his face. Not fear, but concern. And in that moment, I knew. This was my chance. The SUV roared into the field headlights, cutting through the darkness, and slammed to a stop 20 yards away. The driver's door flew open, and Natalie jumped out. "Brandon!" she screamed. "Dad! What's happening?" She ran toward us, her boots crunching on the frozen grass, her breath misting in the cold air. And then she stopped. Froze. Her eyes went wide as she took in the scene, Brandon standing at the edge of the hole with a pistol in his hand. Me on my knees in the dirt, the metal box beside me. Sterling in his expensive suit, calm and composed. And Bennett standing between us, all his hands raised slightly in a placating gesture. "Brandon," Natalie's voice cracked. "What are you doing? Why do you have a gun?" "Natalie, go back to the car," Brandon said, his voice flat. "This doesn't concern you." "The hell it doesn't." She moved closer, her eyes darting between Brandon and me. "Dad, what's going on?" I grabbed the edge of the hole and pulled myself to my feet, my legs shaking. My hands were still bleeding, dirt caked under my fingernails, my whole body screaming with exhaustion. But I looked my daughter in the eye and told her the truth. "Brandon's been drugging me, Natalie. Slipping sedatives into my vitamins for months. Making me confused, disoriented so he could convince you I was losing my mind. And he's working for this man," I pointed at Sterling, "to steal the ranch." Natalie's face went pale. She turned to Brandon, her mouth opening and closing, no sound coming out. "That's not true," Brandon said quickly. "Natalie, your father's not well. He's confused. He climbed out a window in the middle of the night. He's not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking perfectly clearly," I shouted. "You've been poisoning me. You've been lying to her, and you're planning to have me declared incompetent so you can take control of everything." Sterling stepped forward, his hands still casually tucked in his coat pockets, his voice smooth and calm. "Miss Fletcher, he said, addressing Natalie like a concerned neighbor. I'm afraid your father is suffering from severe cognitive decline. He's become paranoid, delusional. We're here to help him, to keep him safe before he hurts himself or someone else. That's a lie. Bennett's voice cut through the cold air like a blade. He pulled the folded letter from his coat pocket and held it up. Your mother wrote this letter before she passed away. She knew what was happening. She knew Sterling was after your father, and she knew Sterling was responsible for her condition. Natalie's head snapped toward Bennett. What? Your mother's cancer progressed abnormally fast. Bennett set his voice hard. Faster than any of her doctors could explain. Sterling has connections in pharmaceutical companies' hospitals. He manipulated her treatment, accelerated her condition. Your mother didn't just pass away, Natalie. She was targeted, harmed. Natalie's legs buckled slightly. She staggered, one hand going to her mouth. No, she whispered. No, that's not. Mom had cancer. She was sick. That's not. It's true, I said quietly. Patricia tried to protect me, and Sterling took her from us. Natalie turned to look at Sterling, her eyes wide and brimming with tears, and for a moment I saw her mother in her, the same fierce protectiveness, the same refusal to accept cruelty. But then her face crumpled. Dad. Her voice was barely a whisper. She looked at me, then at Brandon, then back at me. The guardianship. It was supposed to help you. Brandon said, he said we'd use the money from the ranch to get you the best care. A good facility, professional help. He said it was the right thing to do. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. You knew. My voice came out raw, broken. You knew about the guardianship plan. Natalie's face twisted with something between guilt and confusion. We were just trying to help. Brandon said you couldn't manage the ranch anymore. He said you were forgetting things, losing time. You thought you'd sell the ranch. I said, my voice flat. You thought you'd put me in a home and take the money. No. Natalie's voice cracked. It wasn't like that. Brandon said, enough. Brandon's voice cut through the air, cold and sharp. He turned to look at Natalie, and for the first time I saw the mask drop. The warmth, the charm, the concern, all of it gone. What was left was something hard and empty. We don't have time for this, he said flatly. Natalie stared at him, her mouth open, realization dawning slowly across her face. Brandon, she whispered. He didn't look at her. He turned back to me, raising the pistol. Give me the box, Warren. Now. Sterling sighed, a sound of irritation more than anything else. This is taking too long. He reached into his coat and pulled out a gun of his own, sleek black Professional. He didn't point it at me. Not yet. He just held it loosely at his side like a man checking his watch. Mr. Hayes, Sterling said calmly. Shoot him. We'll clean this up and be gone in 10 minutes. Brandon hesitated. His hand wavered, the barrel of the pistol dipping slightly. Do it, Sterling said, and that's when Natalie moved. She didn't think, didn't hesitate. She just ran, straight toward me, straight between Sterling's gun and my chest. No! I shouted, but she was already there. Her arms spread wide, her body a shield between me and the man who'd taken everything from me. Sterling's cold eyes flicked to her, and his expression didn't change. He raised the gun, leveling it at her chest. Miss Fletcher, he said quietly. Move. No. Natalie said, her voice shaking but firm. You're not going to hurt my father. Sterling's finger tightened on the trigger. Time stopped. My daughter, the woman who'd known about the guardianship, who'd talked about selling the ranch, who'd chosen money over me, was standing between me and a monster's gun. And I realized in that frozen moment that she hadn't known. Not really. She'd been lied to, manipulated, used. Just like I had been 36 years ago. "Natalie," I whispered. "Please move." She didn't. Sterling's finger moved on the trigger, and the world held its breath. Still watching, drop a 1 in the comments to let me know you're following Warren's story to the end. Fair warning, what comes next includes dramatized details for storytelling purposes. If that's not for you, this is a good place to step away. Natalie didn't move. Sterling's gun was leveled at her chest, his finger resting on the trigger, and she stood there like a wall of stone. Her arms were still spread wide, shielding me, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps that misted in the freezing air. "Miss Fletcher," Sterling said quietly, his voice as cold as the ground beneath my feet. "Move. Now. Or you'll be gone with him." Natalie's voice shook, but the words came out clear and sharp. "Then shoot me first." For the first time, I saw something flicker across Sterling's face. Not fear, not hesitation, just calculation. Like he was running the numbers in his head, weighing the cost of pulling the trigger. Brandon moved. "Wait." He stepped forward, his gun lowering slightly, his face pale. "Sterling, wait. She doesn't need to." "She's in the way," Sterling said flatly. "She's my wife." Brandon's voice cracked, desperation bleeding through. "You don't have to." "Your wife," Sterling interrupted, his eyes never leaving Natalie, "is standing between me and 36 years of evidence that will put me away for the rest of my life. So either she moves or I move her." Natalie turned her head slightly, looking back at Brandon. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed and wet with tears. But there was something else there now, something hard, something breaking. "You said we'd help him," she whispered. "You said the guardianship was to protect him. You said we'd use the ranch money to get him proper care." Brandon opened his mouth, then closed it. "You never said anything about drugs," Natalie continued, her voice rising. "About poisoning him, about making him think he was losing his mind, about this man." She gestured toward Sterling without looking at him, her hand trembling. "About working with criminals, about Mom." Her voice broke. "You said Mom's passing was natural. You said it was just cancer." Brandon's jaw tightened. For a moment I thought he might lie again. Spin another story. But then his expression shifted, and the mask, what was left of it, finally cracked. "You wanted your lifestyle back, Natalie," he said coldly. "Don't act innocent. You knew what the guardianship meant. You knew we'd have to sell the ranch to pay off my debts. You didn't ask questions because you didn't want to know the answers." Natalie's face went white. "What?" The word came out, barely a whisper. "You wanted the trips, the restaurants, the jewelry." Brandon continued, his voice flat and empty. "You wanted everything we had before the money ran out, and you were willing to do whatever it took to get it back." "No," Natalie said, shaking her head. No, You signed the guardianship petition," Brandon said. "You didn't even read it. You just signed it because I told you to." Natalie staggered like she'd been struck. "I thought," her voice cracked, "I thought we were helping him." Brandon laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Then you weren't paying attention." And that's when the world exploded into light. Blinding white spotlights slammed into us from 3 directions at once, so bright I couldn't see anything but the glare. A voice boomed across the field, amplified and commanding. FBI, drop your weapons, hands in the air. Sterling spun toward the lights, his gun swinging away from Natalie for just a split second, and then he turned it on me. I saw his eyes lock onto mine, saw the cold decision settle across his face. If he was going down, he was taking me with him. His finger tightened on the trigger. No. Bennett moved. He launched himself across the space between us, slamming into Sterling's side just as the gun went off. The crack of the shot split the night, deafening and sharp, and I felt something hot tear across my left shoulder. Pain exploded through me, white-hot and blinding. I staggered backward, my hand going instinctively to the wound. My fingers came away slick with blood. But I was alive. Bennett and Sterling hit the ground hard, rolling, grappling for the gun. FBI agents in tactical gear swarmed in from all sides. Their rifles raised their voices, sharp and commanding. "Hands, let me see your hands! Don't move!" Two agents grabbed Sterling, wrenching him away from Bennett and slamming him face first into the frozen ground. His gun skittered across the dirt. One agent kicked it away, while another pressed a knee into Sterling's back, yanking his arms behind him. Sterling didn't fight. He just lay there breathing hard, his silver hair falling across his face. "Dominic Sterling." Agent Palmer's voice rang out as she stepped into the light, her FBI badge held high. "You're under arrest for money laundering, extortion, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice." More agents moved toward Brandon. He dropped his pistol without a word, his hands going up slowly. His face was blank, empty, like all the fight had drained out of him. Sheriff Monroe appeared beside him, pulling Brandon's arms behind his back and snapping cuffs around his wrists. "Brandon Hayes," Monroe said grimly. "You're under arrest for attempted harm, drugging, conspiracy to commit fraud, and a whole lot more. You have the right to remain silent." But I wasn't listening anymore. Because Natalie was moving. She turned away from the chaos, away from the lights and the agents and the man she'd married, and she ran to me. Her arms wrapped around me and she collapsed against my chest, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. "I'm sorry," she choked out. "I'm so sorry, Dad. I didn't know. I know." I whispered, my good arm wrapping around her. "I know, sweetheart." Agent Palmer stepped over to us, her eyes flicking to my shoulder. "You're hit." "It's just a graze," I said. And it was. The bullet had torn through the fabric of my coat and scored a line across my shoulder, but it hadn't gone deep. Palmer nodded, then crouched down beside the metal box still lying in the dirt. She looked at me, her expression unreadable. "This is the evidence." I nodded. She opened the lid carefully, her eyes scanning the contents, discs, tapes, the journal, Patricia's letters. Then she closed it and stood signaling to one of her team. "Bag it. Chain of custody. I want this in Denver by sunrise." She turned back to me, and for the first time something like respect crossed her face. 36 years, she said quietly. 36 years, I echoed. Then 3 people harmed, Howard and Beatrice Caldwell, and Patricia. Palmer's jaw tightened. And finally, justice. I looked past her toward the 2 men being loaded into the back of separate police vehicles. Sterling cold and silent. Brandon staring at nothing. And then I looked down at my daughter still sobbing against my chest. Justice, maybe. But at what cost? By 4:30 in the morning, the field had transformed into a crime scene. Yellow police tape fluttered in the cold wind, marking off the area around the cottonwood tree. FBI agents in tactical gear moved methodically across the frozen ground, photographing evidence, taking measurements, cataloging every detail. Sheriff Monroe's deputies stood guard at the perimeter keeping watch, even though there was no one left to keep out. I sat on the tailgate of an ambulance, my coat draped over my shoulders, while a paramedic finished wrapping my arm. The bullet had torn a shallow groove across my left shoulder, painful, bloody, but nothing serious. The paramedic had cleaned it, packed it with gauze, and wrapped it tight with white bandage. "You're lucky," she said, taping the final edge down. "Half an inch deeper and you'd be looking at surgery." I nodded, but I didn't feel lucky. Natalie sat beside me, her hands folded in her lap, her face pale and streaked with dried tears. She hadn't said a word since the agents had led Brandon away in handcuffs. She just watched silent and hollow as they'd loaded him into the back of a sheriff's vehicle and closed the door. Agent Palmer walked over carrying the metal box. She set it down on the ambulance floor and crouched beside it, pulling on a pair of latex gloves before opening the lid. Inside, exactly as I'd left them 36 years ago, were the pieces of Dominic Sterling's downfall. 10 floppy disks still in their protective sleeves, 8 cassette tapes, their labels faded but legible, a leather-bound journal filled with photocopied documents, bank statements, and handwritten notes. And beneath it all, a stack of photographs, me and Howard Caldwell, shaking hands outside his Boston office. Sterling in the background, watching. Palmer examined each item carefully, her expression unreadable. Then she looked up at me. "This is good," she said. "Better than good. Financial records, recordings, witness testimony. Combined with what Howard left us in his will, this is enough to put Sterling away for the rest of his life. Money laundering, extortion conspiracy. And we'll tie him to the Caldwells and your wife." I swallowed hard. "How long?" "Life." Palmer said without hesitation. "No parole. He'll never see daylight again." She closed the box and signaled to one of her team. An agent came over, logged the evidence, and carried it toward a black SUV with federal plates. "What about Brandon?" Natalie's voice was small, broken. Palmer glanced at her, her expression softening slightly. "He'll be charged with conspiracy to commit harm, drugging, fraud, and obstruction. With a plea deal, he's looking at 15 years minimum. Without one," she shrugged, "could be 25. Natalie flinched like she'd been struck. Palmer stood, pulling off her gloves. "We'll need statements from both of you, not tonight, later today after you've had some rest. But we will need everything." I nodded. Palmer hesitated, then looked at me with something close to respect. "You did the right thing, Mr. Fletcher, holding on to that evidence for 36 years. Not many men would have had the courage." She walked away before I could tell her the truth, that it wasn't courage, it was guilt. Natalie and I sat in silence for a long moment, watching the agents work. The sky was starting to lighten in the east, the black night fading to deep blue. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster crowed. I turned to look at my daughter. She was staring down at her hands, her shoulders hunched, her whole body trembling. I wanted to reach out to hold her, to tell her everything was going to be okay. But I couldn't. Not yet. "Natalie," I said quietly. She looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "You knew," I said. "You knew about the guardianship. You knew about the ranch money." Her face crumpled. "Dad, I need to hear you say it." Natalie's breath hitched. She looked away, tears streaming down her face. "I thought," her voice broke, "I thought we were helping you. Brandon said you couldn't manage the ranch anymore. He said you were forgetting things, getting confused. He said the guardianship was the only way to keep you safe. And the ranch." I asked, my voice harder than I intended. "Selling it, using the money." Natalie's hands twisted in her lap. "Brandon said, he said we'd use it for your care. A good facility, professional staff. He said you'd be happier somewhere safe where you didn't have to worry. But you needed it too, I said quietly. Didn't you? She looked at me, her face stricken. I needed... Her voice faltered. We needed... money, I finished for her. You needed money, for the lifestyle you'd lost, for the debts Brandon had. And I was in the way. Natalie's face twisted with shame. I didn't know Dad. I swear I didn't know about the drugs, about Sterling, about Mom. I thought it was just a guardianship. I thought it was legal. I thought we were doing the right thing. You didn't ask, I said. You didn't want to know. She sobbed, burying her face in her hands. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know it would be like this. I looked at her, my daughter, the little girl I'd raised, the woman Patricia had loved more than anything, and I felt my heart break all over again. I know, I said quietly. And I did. I knew she hadn't understood the full truth. I knew Brandon had lied to her, manipulated her, used her love for me as a weapon. But I also knew she'd chosen not to ask questions. She'd chosen comfort over truth, just like I had 36 years ago. Across the field, 2 deputies were loading Sterling into the back of a police car. The old man moved slowly, his hands cuffed behind his back, his silver hair disheveled. He glanced up as they guided him into the seat, and his eyes locked onto mine. Even from 50 yards away, I could see the hatred burning there. The deputy closed the door, and Sterling pressed his face close to the window, his lips moving. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read them on his lips. You should have disappeared in '89. I stood, ignoring the pain in my shoulder, and walked toward the car. The deputy stepped aside, letting me approach. I leaned close to the window, close enough that Sterling could see my face clearly in the growing dawn light. I did disappear, I said quietly. For 36 years, I kept my word. I stayed silent. Sterling's eyes narrowed. You're the one who wouldn't let go, I continued. You're the one who came after Patricia. After me. After everyone who knew the truth. This isn't on me, Sterling. This is on you. I turned and walked away. Behind me, the engine started, and the car pulled away, carrying Dominic Sterling toward the rest of his life in a federal prison. When I got back to the ambulance, Natalie was still sitting there, her face buried in her hands. I sat down beside her, and after a moment I put my good arm around her shoulders. She leaned into me, sobbing quietly. Dad, she whispered. Yeah, sweetheart. What really happened in 1989? I closed my eyes, and I knew it was time to tell her the truth. I opened my eyes and looked at my daughter. She was still leaning against me, her face buried in my shoulder, her body shaking with quiet sobs. Around us, the crime scene was winding down, FBI agents packing up equipment, deputies securing the yellow tape. The first pale light of dawn creeping across the frozen field. But I couldn't tell her here. Not like this. Not surrounded by strangers and spotlights and the hole we dug in the earth. Not here, I said quietly. Let's go home. Natalie pulled back, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. She nodded. Bennett appeared beside us, his coat pulled tight against the cold. I'll drive. We walked to his Mercedes in silence. Natalie climbed into the passenger seat, staring out the window at nothing. I sat in the back, my bandaged shoulder throbbing, and watched the ranch disappear behind us as we pulled away. The drive back to the house took 20 minutes. The sky lightened with every mile black, fading to deep blue, then pale gold. By the time Bennett pulled into the driveway, the sun was just breaking over the eastern hills, casting long shadows across the frozen grass. The house looked the same as it always had, 2 stories of weathered wood and stone, the porch light still burning the cottonwood trees, bare and skeletal against the dawn sky. But it felt different now. Heavier, like the weight of 36 years had finally settled onto its foundation. We walked inside without speaking. Bennett made coffee, strong black, the kind that burns going down but keeps you upright when your body's screaming for sleep. He handed me a mug, then one to Natalie, and we moved into the living room. The fire in the hearth had burned down to embers hours ago, leaving the room cold and dim. Bennett knelt and added a few logs, coaxing the flames back to life. Natalie curled up on the leather couch, her hands wrapped around the mug, her eyes red and hollow. I sat beside her, and Bennett took the armchair across from us. The clock on the mantel read 6 o'clock in the morning. I took a breath, and I told her. In 1989, I began my voice rough. I was 31 years old. Your mother was 8 months pregnant with you. We were living in a one-bedroom apartment in Boston, barely scraping by. I was working as a junior accountant for a firm called Hammond & Associates, 40 hours a week reviewing spreadsheets for people who made 10 times what I did. Natalie's eyes never left my face. My one day, I was assigned to review the books for a real estate development firm, Caldwell Properties, and I found a discrepancy. Just a single number that didn't match. But when I pulled that thread, the whole thing unraveled. I paused, letting the weight of it settle. Howard Caldwell and Dominic Sterling had laundered $6.1 million through fake property sales. Shell companies falsified appraisals, offshore transfers. It was all there, buried in the paperwork. And I had the evidence to prove it. "Why didn't you go to the police?" Natalie asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because I was terrified," I said. "And desperate. Your mother was about to give birth. We had no savings, no safety net. I was one paycheck away from losing everything." I looked at her. "So I made a choice." Her eyes widened slightly. "I went to Howard Caldwell and Dominic Sterling," I said. "And I told them I'd keep quiet if they gave me a way out. A fresh start." "The ranch," Natalie whispered. I nodded. "They bought it for us. 200 acres in Wyoming. Paid off the deed, transferred it into my name, set us up with 5 years of living expenses. And in exchange, I destroyed the evidence I'd compiled and promised never to speak a word of it." "But you didn't destroy it," she said. "No." I closed my eyes. "I made copies, buried them under the first cottonwood tree we planted the day we moved here. I told myself it was insurance, but really," my voice cracked, "really it was guilt. I couldn't let go of what I'd done. Couldn't forgive myself for building a life on blood money." Silence filled the room. Then Bennett spoke. "Warren won't be prosecuted," he said calmly. "The statute of limitations on financial crimes like blackmail is 7 years. It's been 36, and he's cooperated fully with the FBI. There's no case." Natalie looked at me, tears streaming down her face. "And Mom," my throat tightened. "Your mother found out 6 months before she passed away. Howard sent her a letter trying to warn me. She started investigating on her own, trying to protect me. But Sterling found out. He hurt her," Bennett said quietly. "Manipulated her treatment. Accelerated her condition." Natalie's face crumpled. "She was trying to save you." "She did save me," I whispered. "She left me the key. She left me her letters. She gave me the chance to end this, and she forgave me, Natalie, even knowing what I'd done." I reached over and took her hand. "Your mother was the best person I ever knew, and she loved you more than anything." Natalie buried her face in her hands, sobbing. And then through the tears, she started talking. "Brandon convinced me you couldn't manage the ranch. she said, her voice breaking. He said you were forgetting things, losing time. He said we needed to take control before you hurt yourself. And he said we'd sell it. Use the money for your care and to pay off his debts. $300,000. She looked up at me, her face twisted with shame. I knew it was wrong, Dad. I knew. But I wanted my old life back. The trips, the nice things, the life before money got tight. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I told myself we were helping you, but I was lying to myself. I stared at her, and I saw my own reflection from 36 years ago, standing in Howard's office telling myself I was doing it for my family. You chose money over me, I said quietly. Natalie's face shattered. I chose what I thought was best, but I was lying to myself. Do you regret it? She met my eyes. Every second since I saw that gun pointed at you. I nodded slowly. I believed her. Your mother would want me to forgive you, I said. And I want to. But Natalie... I squeezed her hand. It's going to take time. What you did hurt me, deeply. She nodded, tears falling. I understand. But I'm trying, I said. For her. For you. For us. She threw her arms around me, and I held her as she sobbed into my shoulder. And for the first time in 36 years, I felt something I thought I'd lost forever. Hope. 3 days later, I stood at the kitchen sink, unwrapping the bandage from my shoulder. The wound was healing well, a clean line of stitches where the bullet had grazed me pink and tender, but no longer bleeding. The pain had dulled to a manageable ache, but more than that, my mind was clear. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Sharp, present, the fog that had settled over my thoughts, the confusion, the lost time, the moments when I'd forget why I'd walked into a room, all of it was gone. The blood test had confirmed what we already knew. Xylazine, a horse tranquilizer. Brandon had been slipping it into my vitamins every night for 6 months, dosing me just enough to make me seem confused and forgetful without putting me in immediate danger. The doctor had said I was lucky. Another few months, and the cumulative effects could have caused permanent damage. Natalie moved back to the ranch the day after we gave our statements to the FBI. She didn't ask permission. She just showed up with 2 suitcases and a determination in her eyes I hadn't seen since she was a teenager. I'm staying, she'd said. Until you're healed, until we're okay. I didn't argue. We fell into a rhythm. Mornings, we worked the ranch together, feeding the horses, mending fences, mucking out stalls. The work was hard, physical grounding, and it gave us something to do with our hands while we learned how to talk to each other again. She filed for divorce on the 2nd day, walked into the Laramie County Courthouse, and signed the papers without hesitation. When she came home, she looked lighter somehow. Free. The news came through official channels over the next week. Dominic Sterling had been sentenced to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. 3 counts of money laundering, 2 counts of conspiracy obstruction of justice, and enough circumstantial evidence linking him to the Caldwells and Patricia to ensure he'd never see daylight again. Brandon took a plea deal. 15 years for conspiracy, drugging, and fraud. With good behavior, he might see parole in 10. Natalie didn't cry when she heard. She just nodded once and went back to work. But the hardest conversation came on the 4th day. I told Natalie I was selling 50 acres of the ranch, the eastern section along the highway. It was prime land worth $6,000 an acre, $300,000 total. Why? She'd asked, her face pale. To pay off Brandon's debts, I said. The gambling debts, the creditors. If I don't, they'll come after you. Legally, you're still married until the divorce is finalized, which means you're liable. No. Natalie shook her head, the tears streaming down her face. No, Dad, you can't. This ranch is everything. You can't lose part of it because of him. I'm not losing it because of him, I said quietly. I'm protecting it. And I'm protecting you. I reached over and took her hand. You're my daughter, Natalie. I won't let his mistakes destroy you. She sobbed, then collapsing into my arms, and I held her the way I had when she was small and the world felt too big and scary. The money from Howard's estate, $8.5 million, went to work immediately. $4 million to a victim restitution fund for the families Sterling had hurt over the years. $2 million to a cancer research foundation in Patricia's name. The rest went into a trust for the ranch's upkeep and Natalie's future. Natalie got a job in town, nothing fancy, working the counter at a small cafe on Main Street, serving coffee and sandwiches to ranchers and truckers. She came home every night smelling like espresso and fryer oil, exhausted, but satisfied in a way I hadn't seen in years. She was learning to live without luxury, without the trips and the restaurants and the nice things Brandon had promised her. And she was learning that it was enough. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sun set over the fields, Natalie turned to me. Dad, she said softly. Yeah. When can we visit Mom's grave? I looked at her, and I saw the little girl who used to pick wildflowers and leave them on Patricia's pillow, the daughter who'd lost her way, but was finding her way back. Tomorrow, I said. We'll go together. 6 months have passed since the confrontation beneath the cottonwood tree. Today in May 2025, Wyoming's summer has painted the landscape in vivid greens and golds. The sun climbs high, warming the earth that was frozen solid during our desperate midnight dig. The hole we tore open that November night has long been filled, and now a carpet of lush grass covers the spot where 36 years of secrets once lay buried. I stand here with my daughter Natalie, 2 bouquets of wildflowers in our hands. I'm 67 now, my shoulder healed, but carrying a faint scar as a permanent reminder. Natalie is 36, her face calmer than I've seen in years. Together we kneel and place the flowers at the base of the old cottonwood. The tree Patricia and I planted the summer we moved to this ranch, back when the world was simpler and our dreams felt infinite. For Mom, Natalie whispers, her voice steady, the guardian angel of this family. I nod, unable to speak for a moment. Patricia was our anchor, our moral compass. Even in death, her letters guided us through the storm. The evidence she preserved, the warnings she left, the love she poured into every handwritten word, they saved us both. Natalie has decided to stay on the ranch permanently. She's learning the craft of horse breeding from old Hank Patterson, our neighbor, who's been working these lands for 40 years. Every morning she rises at dawn, pulls on worn jeans and boots, and heads to the stables. She's found something here she never discovered in the city: purpose, peace, a true home. I watch our horses now running free across the open pasture under the brilliant Wyoming sun. Their manes flow like silk ribbons, their hooves drumming the earth in a rhythm as old as time. For the first time in decades, I feel a peace I didn't think was possible. The weight I carried since 1989, the guilt, the fear, the constant looking over my shoulder, has finally begun to lift. Natalie breaks the silence. Dad, I still don't think I deserve your forgiveness. I turn to her, seeing the pain still lingering in her eyes. None of us deserve forgiveness, sweetheart, I say gently. Not you, not me. I blackmailed criminals and built a life on dirty money. You got caught up in Brandon's manipulation and your own fears about the future. But Patricia would have wanted us to try. She believed in second chances. She believed in us. Natalie's eyes glisten with tears. I spent so many years chasing things that didn't matter: fancy dinners, expensive trips, status. I thought that was happiness, But standing here working with the horses, sitting with you on the porch at sunset, this is what matters. Love, family, not money. Your mother knew that from the beginning, I reply. She tried to teach me. It took me 36 years and losing her to finally understand. We stand in comfortable silence, the breeze carrying the scent of wildflowers and hay. I realize that I spent 3.5 decades running from my guilt, hiding from the consequences of one desperate choice made when I was 31 years old and terrified for my family. I'm not a hero, I never was. I'm just a father who was given a second chance by a wife who loved me enough to leave me a way out, and by a daughter who chose to come back and rebuild what we'd broken. Natalie reaches over and takes my hand. Thank you for selling that land to pay Brandon's debts. You didn't have to do that. You're my daughter, I say simply, so I won't let his mistakes destroy you. As the sun begins its descent toward the horizon, painting the Wyoming sky in shades of orange and crimson, we turn and walk together back toward the house. Our shadows stretch long across the grass, father and daughter linked by blood, by mistakes, by forgiveness. Behind us, the cottonwood tree stands tall and strong, its branches swaying gently in the evening breeze. It has witnessed everything, the crime, the cover-up, the decades of secrets, the midnight confrontation, and now finally the healing. Standing here at 67, I need to tell you, don't be like me. When I was 31 and discovered that money laundering scheme I thought blackmail would protect my family, instead I built our home on lies, and those lies nearly destroyed us. Family betrayal cuts deeper than any enemy's blade. When I realized Natalie knew about the guardianship that she'd chosen money over me, something inside shattered. But here's the lesson: family betrayal doesn't have to mean the end. It can be a painful new beginning, a chance to rebuild with truth instead of deception. These grandpa stories aren't meant to glorify my choices. They're warnings. Money solves nothing if it costs your soul. I gained a ranch, but spent 36 years looking over my shoulder. Brandon promised Natalie her lifestyle back, but it nearly destroyed her. Grandpa stories like mine teach what no textbook can. Shortcuts always have hidden costs. God gave me a second chance through Patricia's love and Natalie's courage. I don't know why I deserved it, but I believe He uses family betrayal and forgiveness to show us who we really are beneath our masks. My advice: when you face that desperate moment, and you will choose the hard right over the easy wrong, don't rationalize. Don't say just this once, because decades later, you'll still be paying. These grandpa stories exist, so you learn from my mistakes, not your own. Choose integrity. Choose transparency. Choose love over money every time. Thank you for journeying with me to the end. Please share your thoughts in the comments. What would you do if you were in Warren's desperate 1989 situation? Or if your own child betrayed you for money? I genuinely want to hear your perspective. If this story touched you, consider subscribing so you don't miss future content. A quick note: while inspired by real themes of financial crime and family conflict, certain elements have been dramatized for storytelling impact. If this content isn't your preference, feel free to explore other videos that better suit your interests.